Hi, I'm Jeff Macre, Editorial Director of Manufacturing.net and Manufacturing Business Technology. Welcome to Security Breach. We've talked about a lot of challenges, vulnerabilities, attacks, and hacker groups on Security Breach, but no topic generates greater consternation amongst those appearing on the show than artificial intelligence and all the questions it brings to the table, like how much are hackers currently using AI? How will they continue to use it going forward? And how do we defend against its use? According to an IBM report, the average cost for a data breach was just under $5 million last year. Going a step further, the difference between organizations that deployed an AI-based security tool saw their breach cost more than $3 million less than those without such a tool. The report also indicated that it took 74 fewer days to identify and contain such a breach versus those who are not using AI technology for cybersecurity. Additionally, IBM found that the use of AI-fueled cybersecurity strategies has increased by 11% since 2020. While these realizations have produced a number of answers, they've also created new questions, like how should we be using AI for cybersecurity right now? Is AI a greater threat or asset? And do we need to worry about the hallucinations that some long language models like ChatGPT and Bard have become famous for? To help address those and other concerns surrounding AI and cybersecurity, it's my pleasure to welcome Jeff Macre, an industrial security solutions architect from Darktrace, to the show. Darktrace is a leading provider of incident response solutions and artificial intelligence applications. Jeff, thanks so much for joining us today, and welcome to Security Breach. You know, sometimes we start the show off with some softball questions. I'm just gonna go right into it. So here's some high heat just to kick things off here. We're going to talk a lot about artificial intelligence and AI, the role it's playing, especially in industrial cybersecurity. How do you see AI right now? Is it a bigger threat or is it a bigger asset right now when we look at how it fits into a lot of planning, either from a defense or an offensive perspective?
I think as far as overall impact, I think it's a larger benefit for us. I think it's something that we really need to champion and really get behind. But on the flip side, yes, from a threat perspective, it's pretty scary as well. I mean, something that I've always leveraged as we talk about defense in depth and different layers of security. A part of us in the OT space, and something we've always leveraged over our careers in that space, is not a lot of people know about OT systems, right? So by nature, sometimes you have some security to leverage from that perspective, because if somebody ever did gain access to these systems, there can be confusing at times. And you're really not sure what to do. And I think that's a large reason why we haven't seen as many attacks over the years, but that is obviously changing. And I think things like AI really play into that, right? You have the capability of asking one of these tools, hey, tell me about this framework or this protocol, or how would I package XYZ worm together to attack a system in this type of ICS environment? You can ask ChatGPT and things like that these days, and other tools that are out there where you couldn't before. It would take weeks, months of searching for documentation and practicing and understanding these environments to really put these attacks or these complicated attacks together. And that's something that's quite easier, or much easier, for these attackers to do these days. So definitely something for us to be concerned about, but I think AI is going to help a lot more than us internally for the blue team, the defender side, than it is potentially the attackers.
So diving into that a little bit more, when we look at some of the specific vulnerabilities or types of attacks where AI is being utilized, we hear a lot about phishing schemes where AI can really kind of be used to plug in and differentiate some of the messaging and things like that. What are you seeing or experiencing, or what is your feel? Are there certain types of attacks or vulnerabilities that AI is really built to exploit more successfully? And sort of on the flip side too, are there better ways that we can be using it potentially than we are right now?
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, something here at Darktrace, I mean, our product expands not just OT, but also email, cloud, network, you name it. And our email platform, we have seen, and we continue to see a trend in more sophisticated email phishing, less links that we're seeing in emails. And what we see is a lot more of these crafted, well-written, very specific email attacks that are coming in. And then again, we're seeing this because of the generative AI and because of these tools that the attackers are able to leverage. So it's definitely concerning.
Yeah. So you mentioned Darktrace. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the company and some of the things you guys are up to?
Yeah. So Darktrace is a fantastic company. Been around for about 10 years. what we really focus on is a complete different approach to cybersecurity. So overall of my career and really the cybersecurity industry as a whole, we're really focusing, hey, what are all the bad things that are out there? What are these indicators of compromise? What are these known bads that are out in environments that we've seen, that we've detected? Let's track all of those, let's document those, and let's watch for them. And if we ever see them, we're going to tell you about them. That's how a typical cybersecurity platform works. Your antivirus, things like this that you have. We really take a completely different approach at Darktrace. We leverage self-learning AI to really learn and understand your environment. And that is your network, potentially your email, your cloud, your OT environment. And we use thousands of different metrics, these communications that are happening between assets, to really understand what is normal, what is day-to-day communication between these devices. And anything that deviates from that, it's definitely anomalous and definitely something that we should look for, and allows us to be much more accurate when it comes to detecting threats, and much earlier in the attack phase. We're not waiting for something to be compromised. We're detecting something much, much, much earlier than potentially other tools can. So it's very, very interesting stuff.
Yeah, that's a great point you bring up about looking at all those different sort of data points, because I think when we try to bring over some of our IT strategies to the OT environment, it doesn't really match up that well, because a blip on the screen on the IT, well, that's just some discrepancy. It went back to normal. We're not worried about it. OT, that 2-degree temperature spike, that could be somebody probing your system and messing with you a little bit. Could you maybe dive into that concept a little bit more of how important looking and understanding what normal is, seeing the deviations, and just having better visibility and greater sensitivity into all of that data in the OT side of things?
Yeah, I mean, it's really a win-win approach, Jeff. So when we're looking for the anomalies, again, it allows us to detect things much earlier than we would with traditional approaches. One thing that we see as a massive benefit working with our customers at Darktrace is we're able to see things that are anomalous in your environment that aren't malicious. And I know you may think, well, why do I want to see that? You want to see that because it drastically improves our ability to attack or to address things and detect things like insider threats, right? Yeah. Which aren't really going to have a lot of indicators of compromise. These users are already inside of your environment, already have access to these systems. So looking for minute differences in day-to-day activity, or this anomalous nature or this activity across your network, it gives us the ability to really drill in and see all kinds of potential threats, including things like insider threats.
Well, that's interesting too, because when you talk about insider threats, people think I think the context is initially that there's something malicious. Most of the time it's not. It's something fairly innocent. Maybe you could talk a little bit more about that as a place to start for a lot of industrial companies. Look at some of your internal controls, I guess, before you even start worrying about some of the people that might be attacking from the outside.
Yeah, I mean, you said it best, right? So putting things in order, looking at specific things, I think that's something that as a whole in the OT space, I think we really need to take a step back and look at how we approach implementing different controls in across all OT systems. Predominantly for many years, and it continues today, is visibility is the most important thing. And what you'll always hear is, hey, I have to see all my devices. How am I going to protect my devices if I don't know what they are? And I agree 100% with that. However, I don't need to know every single one of my devices to put some protection in place. For example, if I build a house, right, or I have a building, I don't need to know every room to be able to decide, hey, where do I put a camera, or where do I put a smoke detector? If I place some cameras in some specific locations or smoke detectors in some specific locations, I'm going to be much better off, much safer at the end of the day if I just said, hey, listen, let me find out exactly where every asset is at, and let me deploy protections appropriately. So I think a lot of folks in the industry are at that stage, and they're really looking for 100% visibility, when if they just deployed some general protection and leveraged some new technology, some enhancements like self-learning AI, getting that understanding and knowing what normal is inside your environment, even if it isn't 100%. At the end of the day, it'd be great to have protection everywhere, understanding or learning everywhere, but just deploying and leveraging some of these fantastic tools like self-learning AI to understand and learn your environment and show you deviations is a drastic improvement over some of the steps that we take today.
I think that's an interesting point. We want to get to 100%. I don't think anybody knows what that looks like or how you get there, but trying to go from 10 or 15 to 100% is what gets people bogged down and frustrated, and they don't know how to justify expenses and investments and things like that. Whereas a more incremental approach like you're talking about can make a ton of sense in making sure the big stuff is taken care of and then working from there. I mean, it's an interesting process that I think could benefit a lot of people, especially in the industrial sector.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, let's face it. At the end of the day, safety is the most important thing. We talk a lot in cybersecurity about the CIA triad, the confidentiality, integrity, availability. And you even hear in OT, hey, it's really not the CIA. It's more like the AIC, right? We care about availability. We want the systems working primarily. But what about safety? Safety is very important. But what about those organizations that are spending so much time trying to get their visibility correct, right? Or getting to that 100%, like you said, and they don't have proper controls in place, right? That is a massive risk that I just don't think is should be taken lightly, right? And we really need to take a step back and say, how do we leverage new technology, things like software and AI? Let's do those deployments and let's move the needle from there instead of deploying in the typical traditional sense.
So, circling back a little bit to AI and looking at this approach in a more systematic, dynamic and implementing more of these cybersecurity protocols, are there specific areas where you've seen AI really be a big win for some companies?
Yeah, I mean, most definitely we're seeing it in like I mentioned, being very, very early in the detection phase was probably the most primary reason that we see it championed, and we love the technology, and our clients love the technology. But we're seeing it in some wins and some success in the compliance area, right? There's new compliance requirements that are really stating, hey, you need to protect all in and outbound connectivity to certain networks, which is a given, right? It's something we've seen for years, but you're starting to see these additional layers added to the compliance requirements, especially in the electric utility space, and that will soon make its way into other sectors, I'm sure, about knowing exactly what's happening inside your environment and understanding anomalous network connectivity. So this is somewhere where, we're massively leveraging the self-learning AI that we've already had and we've been leveraging for 10 years as an organization, and it's quite successful for our clients.
Interesting. I'd like to just kind of hit on a couple of other hot topics that have really become a big talking point in cybersecurity. One of the big ones is finding the right people, the right cybersecurity talent. I'd be curious in working in the industrial sector as you have, what have you seen been more successful or best practices, if you will? Does it come from taking folks from the IT side? Is it growing more operational engineers and trying to get them cybersecurity versed? Do we need to start from scratch in some instances and just bring somebody in new? I'd be interested in your thoughts there.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that's near and dear to my heart, Jeff. I mean, about 5 years ago, I started teaching at the University of Central Florida here in the cybersecurity program, and I've taken it upon myself to share and tell students not just about the cybersecurity topics and concepts that we're learning in school and in our program, but about what it's like to work in cybersecurity, especially in the OT space. I think a lot of folks think that cybersecurity is you're in a cubicle all day long, or you're working from home wearing a hoodie, and you're up coding late night and things like that. But there's a lot of us that work in the cybersecurity space, as you're aware, that are in critical infrastructure, or in manufacturing, or in oil and gas sector, that get to go on site and work in the field and travel around. It's a lot of fun. So I think the onus is really on us to share with how great this community is. But one thing that I see that's a massive success is when the teams that we do have in OT are open to work more with IT. I think that's something over the years that's been very, very difficult to get those two teams to work. And yes, there's a lot of great talent in IT. There's a lot of verticals and a lot of channels for training and getting folks into the IT community. I think we need to leverage those teammates. Typically, most companies have a lot more IT employees than they do OT, and those teams are working together. That's something that we champion as well at Darktrace. When we deploy our technology in the OT side or the IT side, the software AI is the same, the appliance is the same, they work harmoniously together. We can share resources between IT and OT. So when you're talking about incident response and budgets and tracking of alerts and building a SOC, you have one technology that can be used by different teams. So I think bringing those teams together is really going to help massively, or leveraging IT to help with some of that workload and that burden we have on the OT side is definitely a low-hanging fruit and something that we should leverage. And I think you'll start to see more technology like Darktrace that is functioning in the OT and the IT, so that way these teams that do come together, they can be more efficient and they can leverage similar platforms to the same platform across multiple sectors.
Yeah, it's interesting. We've been talking in the industrial sector about trying to break those silos down for probably the last 10 years. And I think really the good and bad of all this escalation in cybersecurity attacks and cybersecurity as a priority has elevated that need as well. I think we are seeing those two groups working together much more than they have in the past because they're being forced to. I think there's a lot of executive level mandates that are coming down. But regardless of the reason, it's good to see that it's happening. We still have a ways to go, but it does seem like there's a lot of improvement there. And I think it's kind of a byproduct of this expanding attack surface that we're seeing in the industrial sector. You've talked a lot about visibility, which is a huge concern on the OT side of things. As the attack sector, as this attack area grows, are you seeing other vulnerabilities pop up that you're paying a little bit more attention to now than maybe you would have in the past?
Yeah, and we see a lot of new threats. The attackers are getting more and more advanced. They always try to stay a couple steps ahead. They try, yes, right. But the one thing that we're seeing and that's concerning of us is it's not just individual attacks to OT and ICS systems. You're seeing the packaging of this malware that allows to then be built upon, and that's something that we saw with Pipedream and Destroyer and some of these other platforms that have been detected. And this malware that's been detected is these attackers are not just building very specific attacks to certain equipment. They're building the framework for these attacks. And from there, numerous different attacks can be conducted. So that's something that's quite concerning for us, as that has obviously kind of leveled up the game when it comes to OT cybersecurity, and something that we monitor very closely.
Yeah. I think one of the interesting things, too, that we're seeing, and this has been an issue for forever, probably, it's just being more exploited as of late, is taking new technology and connecting it to a lot of legacy systems. We were talking before that you've worked with a lot of utilities on the electrical side, water treatment there especially. How are you working with those folks? And I guess maybe where does the onus lie? Do you rely on the suppliers more of that new technology to say, here's what you need to do? Is it on the implementers or the companies that are making these purchases to understand how things need to connect? Be really interested in your thoughts there in terms of this dynamic and some of the vulnerabilities that are created when you take the old stuff and you connect it with the new stuff.
Yeah, in that scenario, typically you're going to have a lot of vendors working together, Jeff, in these environments, right? If you talk about a generation facility or a water treatment plant, it's not just one vendor. And in some cases there are, but typically it's a few vendors that are working together. So putting the onus or putting the responsibility truly on the vendor, there's definitely a responsibility from the vendor to provide the products that they say they're going to provide, and interoperability between these different systems that they say that they can provide. That's definitely there. But the real onus is on these utilities, these organizations, these entities, to make sure they're asking the right questions. Yeah. That can be quite challenging. I know that's a big task, or quite a challenge to put on their shoulders. So what I do recommend is, in the electric utility space, there's a lot of organizations, right? If you are electric utility in the municipality space, there's a large organization, APPA, that you can be a member of, you can leverage for knowledge, guidance, things like that. NRECA is another one in the electric utility space. AWIA in the water space. We have a lot of organizations that have recommendations, that have projects implemented for members of the community to implement these new technologies and ask these questions, and what's required or what you should be checking for when you are implementing new OT systems. So I would definitely encourage them to be involved. Things have changed a lot, even over the last few years. But the last 5 to 10 years, there's just so much more accessibility and knowledge and guidance in the OT space. And I think that's going back to your last question, Jeff, is about how do we get more folks in the community. I think we're doing something right, because every conference I go to, more and more podcasts, more events, more things like this, more focus in the OT space. So we're definitely doing something right. We just need to continue doing that for sure. And even entities need to be leveraging these organizations and this outreach. That's really the best way to solve this problem.
Yeah, it's interesting with a lot of things in cybersecurity, it really does start with the most simple things, the blocking and tackling, if you will. And in this instance, it's just one or two more questions to talk to the integrators of those new technologies and understanding there's a security process in place. I understand, you're obviously with Darktrace and the champion of your services and your products, but one of the things we hear from a lot of OT security specialists is, man, I've got so many tools. There's so many offerings out there, and what happens is I end up with this plethora of tools, and it's too many to manage almost. I'm not sure what I should be using where. Could you offer some advice or some thoughts there in terms of how to manage the number of tools you're using? And once you do get everything in there, what is the right way to keep all of that organized to stay up to date on what you need to be doing?
Yeah, it's a great question. It does seem like there's especially in the OT space, there's a new tool for everything. I'm really excited to see that. That's something that years ago, right, when you were implementing cybersecurity at a new control center or a new facility or a manufacturing plant, you didn't have a lot of options. And nowadays to have the options is fantastic. I think we have great vendors in the OT space. Obviously, Darktrace being my primary favorite. I'm an employee there, but the other vendors do a fantastic job as well, and I champion them. And I'm glad that we have a lot of folks in the OT space. The one thing I would ask of these clients, of these end users, to answer your question is to really make sure that they're reviewing their products, right? What we do at Darktrace is different, right? It's a newer approach to cybersecurity. We find it very, very, very effective, very impactful for our clients. And of course, we would want everyone to use Darktrace, but there's a lot of tools that are a good fit for certain clients and maybe not another. So reviewing that, what is your team using, is very, very important. Software can be quite costly, so it's something to definitely consider. Take the time to review the different tools that you have. Ask about integrations. So if you're looking or you're procuring or you're looking into a new product, be very open with that vendor. Hey, these are the other tools that we have that we like, that we use often. How can you complement those tools?
Yeah, that's a great point.
In some cases, integrations can be developed or are already developed, maybe not advertised as much, but they've done it for a prior project or a client, and that can be massive when deploying some of those new tools. And in other cases, right, it's leveraged IT as well. We talked about that, the IT and the OT teams working together. What is the SIM or the SOAR or the network detection tool or things like that the IT team is using or the OT team is using? Let's get feedback. Let's sit down and review. Maybe we can leverage the same tool that'll help out a lot, right? If there's a fire in one place or a situation in one of those, who are they going to call? They're going to call the fellow teammates to come in and assist. So having the same tool, leveraging the same tool, working together is really a win-win across the board when it comes to leveraging different software tools and team members that use them.
No, I think that's a great point, and I agree with you 100%. And just to be clear, I do think it's a positive that there's this many tools out there. There's so many things that are application specific or problem specific in terms of providing different types of solutions that it's a positive thing. We're just running into this interesting dynamic where there's only almost at times too many tools in the toolbox, and that can be it can be an interesting problem to have as well.
It can be challenging. I only see two negatives that come from that, Jeff. It's great that all the vendors are there, like I said, and you agreed. The one thing I do see sometimes it's a negative is there's so many folks in the space. We're not seeing it as much anymore, but clients would be not sure, like, well, I'm confused. There's so many choices. I'm going to kind of put my hands in my pocket and I'm not going to make a decision. And like I mentioned before, it's better to deploy partially across your network, right, than the 100%. Put some protection in place. So that's one thing that concerns me is there's so many choices at times, or there's so much confusion. You go to a conference, there's many different vendors all promising you visibility and things like that, right? So it can be overwhelming at times. So that's one negative that I see, which can definitely be concerning. The other is, there's a lot of new people in the space, like we talked about. There's some folks that are very talented, very knowledgeable, very sharp, smart individuals, but maybe have never stepped in one of your manufacturing facilities or a manufacturer similar to yours. So to take guidance and recommendations from them, it's good, but take it with a grain of salt, right? Listen to what these vendors are saying, what promises they're making. Talk to your other friends, clients in these organizations, get their feedback, and really deploy what's best for you, your organization, and the team that's going to leverage those tools is really the most important things to discuss with you.
Absolutely. Paralysis by analysis can be a very real thing here. Jeff, this has been fantastic. Winding down a little bit, just kind of wondering, are there any other bigger trends? We talked about AI, we talked about visibility and some of the other things that are going on. Any other big trends that you're seeing that could really impact cybersecurity maybe over the next year and a half?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, leveraging AI for the anomaly detection piece, we talked a lot about, and I think I made sure that I painted a clear picture that yes, leveraging anomaly detection, leveraging self-learning AI when it comes to network monitoring is a far superior approach. However, we could take that to the next level, and that is something that we do at Darktrace, where we're leveraging the AI to review our model breaches, to review threats, to review alerts. So basically, we're taking the skill set and the knowledge and the analysis of a SOC analyst, a SOC team member, and we're putting that in the form of AI into the appliance. So instead of coming in and having 5 or 10 disparate alerts, you maybe have, of those 10, maybe 4 of them are associated to a very high level, high fidelity incident. That's where we want to focus our attention first. So typically that's what a SOC analyst would do for you, is come into your platform, look at your different alerts and try to piece together the different needles in a haystack to find an event, to find an incident, to then go rectify or track down or make sure we put a stop to it. We're leveraging AI to do that task as well. And it's a massive time saver for end users. And I think that's a shift that Luckily, Darktrace is way ahead of the curve on, and something we've been doing for a while. But I think across the board, Jeff, if I can make a prediction, you're going to start seeing a lot more of that from vendors because we've made this huge shift to managed services, which is a good thing. It's great to deploy cybersecurity tools and monitoring tools. And sometimes you don't have time to manage them. That's okay. You can have a third party manage it. But man, that third party management services industry is just growing rapidly. Yeah. I see it as a shift to say, hey, if I deployed a tool that was a lot more accurate, higher fidelity alerts, if I could bring down some of the, the repetitive tasks, automate some of that analysis, I wouldn't need this very expensive managed services, or I could lower my services or lower my threshold or the amount of alerts that they review and bring my costs down. So I think that's something that we're going to see a trend across the industry, trying to do more with the tools that we have. And I think AI and leveraging AI is truly the way to do that.
Absolutely. Well, there's some stats we mentioned in the intro to this episode that IBM did some numbers and how it brought down costs, how it brought down response times to attacks. Very significant. It'll be interesting to see how that continues to play out and hopefully improve. Last question I got for you, Jeff, and I want to ask this one to you especially because you seem to have a very positive outlook on things, which is great. I think that is something because we talk about a lot of bad things when it comes to cybersecurity at times when talking about different attacks and different challenges. But when you look at the current state of AI and exposed to some of these, or not AI, cybersecurity, and some of the things that we can sort of get down a rabbit hole on, what keeps you positive, upbeat? What helps you get to sleep at night, even though you know there's a lot of bad stuff out there from bad guys?
What keeps me up at night, I mean, and positive, I guess I could say it, excited for the next day, not worried, is the community, right? I mean, the folks that I started working in this space, 15, 20 years ago are folks that I still see on a day-to-day basis when I attend conferences. There's a very welcoming community, seeing a lot more vendors. Our larger vendors in the space, the Siemens, the Mitsubishis, the Toshibas, the Emersons, the Schneiders, the list goes on and on, Rockwells, they're doing a fantastic job of really starting to focus more on OT security. So these are things that excite me. Something that we've had for quite some time in the industry is what we call Siemens 4.0, right? Which is this big transition. This is this roadmap or this vision from Siemens to start moving more things into the cloud, automate more processes. And that is something that we're seeing, right? I work with a handful of clients that are deploying tech in the cloud and things like that from an OT perspective. A lot more remote access, which is great. So we're leveraging a lot of the new tech, the new tools that are out there. We're embracing that. We're seeing, we're reaping the benefits of these enhancements and investments in cybersecurity. So it's fun. It's exciting. It's never a boring day. And at times, yes, it can be daunting, but someone's got to do the work. And I love working in OT and I love the community. So I wouldn't have it any other way. Thanks,
Jeff. And for more information on the work Jeff and his colleagues are doing, you can check them out at darktrace.com. And thank you for joining us today. To catch up on past episodes, you can go to manufacturing.net, IEN.com, or mbtmag.com. You can also check Security Breach out wherever you get your podcasts, including Apple, Amazon, and Overcast. And if you have a cybersecurity story or topic that you'd like to have us explore in Security Breach, you can reach me at jeff@ien.com. For Jeff Macre, I'm Jeff Ranke, and this is Security Breach.